Bryony didn't know the man bleeding on her doorstep was the condemned Alpha King. She didn't know he'd escaped execution, fought through 20 guards, and tracked her across 3 cities based on a rumor and a prayer. And she definitely didn't know that the bargain she'd strike before dawn would cost her everything she'd built, and give her back everything she'd lost. All she knew was that her fingers were cramping, the candle was guttering, and if she didn't finish this gown by dawn, Master Voss would add another month to her contract. The needle moved through silk like a whisper. Stitch after stitch. Each one perfect, each one bringing her closer to freedom. 47 more days. She'd counted them so many times the number lived behind her eyelids. Bryony's workshop was a narrow room above the tailor shop, barely wide enough for her cot and sewing table. The walls pressed close, thick with the smell of dye and lanolin. A single window overlooked the alley where rats fought over scraps from the butcher next door. Not much of a view, but sometimes, on clear nights, she could see a sliver of moon between the rooftops, and that was enough. 26 years of survival had taught her to find beauty in small things. Her mother had reinforced that lesson, back when there was still laughter in their cottage, still warmth, still hope. Before the night, Mira Thorne walked into the forest and never came back. Bryony's hand faltered. She set down the needle, flexing her fingers to work out the ache. Don't think about her. Not tonight. The gown pooled across her lap, a cascade of midnight blue meant for some merchant's daughter. Pretty fabric. Expensive. The kind of silk that whispered secrets if you knew how to listen. Bryony did know. That was her curse. When she touched certain things, especially fabric, thread, anything woven, she could feel the truth buried in its fibers. Not memories exactly, more like echoes. The lies someone told while wearing a garment, the fear stitched into a rushed hem, the love sewn into a wedding dress. Most of the time, she blocked it out, built walls in her mind thick and high, the way her mother had taught her before disappearing. But some objects screamed so loud even walls couldn't keep them out. This gown was quiet. Just silk and stitches, nothing more. She picked up the needle again. 47 days. Then her debt to Voss would be paid, and she could finally leave this city, find somewhere no one knew her name, somewhere she could stop hiding, stop pretending to be ordinary. The candle flickered. Bryony glanced at the window, but there was no breeze. The night was still, heavy with the kind of silence that made her skin prickle. She was being foolish. Too many late nights, too little sleep. Her mind was playing tricks. She bent back over her work. That's when she heard it. A thud against her door. Soft at first, then harder. Not a knock exactly. More like someone, collapsing against the wood. Bryony froze, needle suspended mid-stitch. No one came here at night. No one even knew which door was hers. She paid extra for that anonymity, skipping meals to afford a separate entrance from the shop. Another thud. Then a voice, low and ragged, barely more than a rasp. Threadseer. I know you're there. Her blood turned to ice. No one had called her that in 8 years. Not since her mother vanished. Not since the night everything went wrong. Bryony didn't move, didn't breathe. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe the exhaustion had finally cracked something loose in her mind. Please. The voice again, weaker now. They're coming. I don't have much time. She should ignore it. Blow out the candle, crawl into bed, pretend she'd heard nothing. That was the safe choice. The smart choice. But something in that voice, the desperation wrapped around the word please, reminded her of another night, another door, another person begging for help. Her mother's face flashed through her memory. The last time Bryony had seen her, standing in the doorway of their cottage, telling 18-year-old Bryony to hide, to not come out no matter what she heard. Bryony had hidden. She'd stayed hidden. And her mother had never come back. The needle slipped from her fingers. Before she could stop herself, she was crossing to the door, her bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. She pressed her palm against the wood. Even through the barrier, she felt it. A pulse of truth so strong it nearly knocked her backward. Pain, desperation, and beneath both, something else. Innocence. Whoever was on the other side of this door believed with absolute certainty that they had done nothing wrong. Bryony slid back the bolt. The man collapsed inward, hitting the floor hard enough to rattle her sewing table. She caught a glimpse of dark hair matted with blood, broad shoulders wrapped in torn cloth, chains, actual chains, binding his wrists together. He looked up at her, and the breath stalled in her lungs. His eyes were gold. Not amber, not brown, but molten and luminous like coins heated in a forge. Predator's eyes. Alpha eyes. But it was the exhaustion in them that held her, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been fighting for so long they'd forgotten what peace felt like. "Close the door," he rasped. "They'll track my scent soon." Bryony should have screamed, should have shoved him back into the alley and barred the door forever. Instead, she stepped over him, peered into the darkness, saw nothing but shadows, and closed the door. "Who are you?" she demanded, whirling to face him. He'd managed to drag himself up against the wall, leaving a smear of blood on her floor. The chains clinked as he shifted, trying to find a position that didn't press against whatever wound was bleeding beneath his ribs. "Someone who needs your help." He studied her face with an intensity that made her want to step back. "You're younger than I expected. You're bloodier than I expected. Who told you about me?" "Your mother." The word hit her like a physical blow. Bryony grabbed the edge of her sewing table to steady herself. "My mother is dead." "No." His wolf-bright eyes held hers. "She's not." The room tilted. Bryony's grip tightened on the table until her knuckles went white. "You're lying." "Touch me." He lifted his chained hands toward her. "You'll know I'm telling the truth." She didn't want to touch him. Didn't want to feel whatever secrets were buried beneath his skin. But the word mother kept echoing through her skull, cracking open doors she'd sealed shut years ago. Bryony reached out with trembling fingers and pressed her palm against his forearm. The truth slammed into her. Images, feelings, flashes of certainty. A cell deep underground, a woman with dark hair like hers, older now but alive. Alive, alive. She yanked her hand back, gasping. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man's jaw flexed. When he spoke, each word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "My name is Soren Valeric, rightful Alpha King of the Northern Territories." He paused. "And in 6 days, they're going to execute me for a murder I didn't commit." Bryony stared at him, her mind refusing to process what she'd just heard. Soren Valeric. She knew that name. Everyone in the 5 territories knew that name. 3 weeks ago, the kingdom had erupted with the news. The Alpha King had poisoned his own father, seized power, and then been captured by loyalists before he could consolidate his stolen throne. The trial had been swift. The verdict was already decided. All that remained was the execution. "You killed King Matthias," Bryony said flatly. The whole kingdom saw the evidence. The whole kingdom saw what they were meant to see. Soren's voice was steady, despite the blood still seeping through his makeshift bandage. Fabricated letters, planted poison vials, testimony from witnesses who were paid or threatened. His amber gaze burned. "I loved my father. I would have died for him. Instead, I'm going to die because of him. Because someone wanted his throne and needed me out of the way." "Someone? Who?" "My uncle, Lord Aldrich Valeric." The name sent a chill down Bryony's spine. She'd heard of Lord Aldrich, the king's younger brother, always standing in the shadows, always watching. The kingdom had mourned when he'd tearfully testified against his own nephew, calling it the hardest thing he'd ever done. He seemed devastated at the trial, Bryony said slowly. "He's an excellent performer." Soren's laugh was bitter, edged with pain. He's been planning this for years. Patient, methodical. He poisoned my father, framed me, and wept convincing tears while the council sentenced me to death. And you expect me to believe you because you already know I'm telling the truth. Soren held her gaze. You felt it when you touched me. That's your gift. You see truth. And I have nothing but truth to offer. Bryony's heart hammered against her ribs. He was right. When she'd touched him, she'd felt no deception, no hidden guilt. Just pain and desperation and the absolute certainty of innocence. But that didn't mean she should help him. What do you want from me? She asked. The evidence against me is physical. Letters I supposedly wrote, vials of poison found in my chambers, a dagger with my crest used to threaten a witness. Soren leaned forward, chains rattling. All of it was planted, fabricated, and you can prove it. By touching objects and telling you what I feel, no court would accept that as evidence. They would if you showed them exactly what happened. Who really wrote those letters? Who really placed the poison? His voice dropped. Your mother could do that. Project what she saw so others could witness it too. The council members who remember her would trust that gift. Bryony's breath snagged. You knew my mother? Personally? She worked for my father. Years ago, before you were born. Something shifted in Soren's expression. She was his truth seer, the one who verified treaties, exposed liars, protected the throne from deception. When she disappeared, we thought she'd fled, that someone had threatened her into hiding. He paused. We were wrong. What do you mean wrong? Soren's expression hardened. 6 months ago, while investigating Aldrich's network, I found records. Secret prison transfers, names of people who'd been inconvenient to his plans. He met her eyes. Your mother's name was on that list. She didn't run Bryony. She was taken, and she's been Aldrich's prisoner ever since. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. 8 years. 8 years of grief. Of believing her mother had abandoned her or died alone in the forest. 8 years of nightmares and unanswered questions. And all along she'd been locked in a cell somewhere, kept alive for reasons Bryony couldn't fathom. Why? Bryony's voice cracked. Why keep her alive? Because she's useful. Her gift is too valuable to waste. Soren's expression went cold. And because killing her would mean losing leverage over anyone who might come looking for her. He paused deliberately. Anyone like you? Bryony sank onto the edge of her cot, her legs no longer willing to hold her. How do I know this isn't a trick? She asked. You could be lying about everything, using my mother as bait to manipulate me into helping you. I could be. Soren didn't flinch from the accusation. But I'm not. Touch me again if you need proof. She didn't want to touch him again. The first time had left her feeling scraped raw, like she'd been turned inside out. But the alternative was worse. Living the rest of her life wondering if her mother was rotting in some cell while Bryony sewed gowns for merchant daughters. She crossed the room, knelt beside him, and pressed her fingers to his temple. This time, she went deeper. She saw Aldrich's study, papers spread across a desk, and her mother's name circled in red ink. She saw a map with a location marked Thornhallow Keep, deep in the eastern mountains. She saw Soren finding the documents, his hands shaking, and his jaw tight with fury. And beneath it all, she felt his intention, pure and unwavering. I will expose him. I will free everyone he's caged, even if it kills me. Bryony pulled back, breathing hard. You were trying to save her, she whispered, before they arrested you. You were building a case against Aldrich. I was close. Too close. Soren's voice was heavy with regret. He moved faster than I anticipated, killed my father before I could warn him, then framed me before I could expose the truth. And now you're supposed to die in 6 days. 5 now, technically. It's past midnight. Bryony almost laughed at the absurdity. Here she was, sitting on a blood-stained floor with an escaped convict, discussing execution timelines like they were negotiating delivery dates. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "Come with me. 5 days. Help me read the fabricated evidence, prove my innocence, expose Aldrich's conspiracy." Soren held her gaze. "In return, I'll help you find your mother. Once I reclaim my throne, I'll have the resources to tear Thornhallow apart stone by stone if necessary." "And if you fail? If Aldrich catches us both?" "Then we die together, instead of separately." The corner of his mouth twitched grimly. Not the most inspiring pitch, I admit. No, it wasn't. But Bryony thought about 47 days of stitching silk while her mother suffered. Thought about the rest of her life. Always running, always hiding, never knowing the truth. "I want more than a promise," she said. "I want a binding oath." Soren's eyebrows rose. "A blood oath? Those are permanent." "I know what they are." Her mother had explained them once, long ago. 2 souls bound together until the terms were fulfilled. Unbreakable. Inescapable. "You're asking me to risk my life. I want insurance." "Fair enough." Soren looked around the room. "Do you have a blade?" Bryony retrieved her sharpest needle, the one she used for leatherwork. "It would have to do." She heated it in the candle flame, watching the metal glow orange, then knelt beside him again. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "I, Soren Valeric, swear to help Bryony Thorn locate and free her mother, Mira Thorn, in exchange for her assistance in proving my innocence." He held out his palm. "By blood and bond, I am bound." Bryony pressed the needle into his skin. A bead of crimson welled up, dark in the candlelight. Then she did the same to her own palm, wincing at the sharp sting. "I, Bryony Thorn, swear to use my gift to reveal the truth of Soren Valeric's accusation." She pressed her bleeding palm against his. "By blood and bond, I am bound." The moment their blood mingled, something snapped into place. It wasn't painful. It was worse than pain. It was recognition, deep and primal, like her soul had been waiting for this contact her entire life without knowing it. Heat flooded through her, starting where their palms touched and spreading outward until her whole body thrummed with awareness. Soren's eyes widened. His breath caught. He felt it too. "What?" Bryony tried to pull away, but her hand wouldn't cooperate. "What is that?" "The oath," Soren said, but his voice was strained, uncertain. "It's just the oath settling." They both knew he was lying. When their hands finally separated, the absence of contact felt like losing something vital. Bryony pressed her bleeding palm against her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. Neither of them spoke about what had just happened, but something had changed between them. Something neither of them was ready to name. They left before dawn. Soren knew hidden routes through the city, paths that wound through cellars and sewers and abandoned buildings. His wounds had stopped bleeding, though Bryony suspected that had more to do with his wolf healing than her clumsy bandaging. She'd packed light. Her mother's comb, a change of clothes, the leather needle that still carried traces of their blood. Everything else she left behind without a second glance. The workshop had never been home. Just a cage with better lighting. The city fell away as the sun rose. They emerged from a drainage tunnel into a forest so dense the light turned green and gold, filtered through a canopy that seemed to breathe. "Where are we going?" Bryony asked. "A safe house. 3 hours walk." Soren moved through the underbrush with a predator's grace, barely disturbing the leaves. "People loyal to me have been gathering there since my arrest. They're few, but they're trusted." "How few?" "A handful of loyal fighters. My brother leads them." Bryony nearly stopped walking. A handful against the Lord Regent and his entire army? A handful who would die before betraying me. Soren glanced back at her. Quality over quantity. They walked in silence after that. Bryony focused on keeping pace, on not tripping over roots, on ignoring the strange awareness that pulsed between them with every step. The bond, the one they weren't discussing, hummed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. The deeper they traveled, the older the trees became. Trunks wider than cottages, bark grooved with centuries of growth. Bryony had never seen anything like it. The air tasted different here, cleaner, wilder, carrying the scent of pine and something else, something that made the wolf part of Soren's heritage feel less like legend and more like truth. Twice she caught movement in the underbrush, eyes watching, then vanishing. Wolves, she realized. Real ones. They weren't threatening, just observing, escorting. They know you, she said quietly. They know their king. Soren's voice held no arrogance, only weariness. Whether I deserve the title anymore, that's another question. She found herself watching him without meaning to. The way his shoulders moved, the tension he carried even when walking, the glimpses of dried blood beneath his torn shirt. You should rest, she said finally. You're still injured. I'll rest when we arrive. He didn't slow down. 3 hours became 4. The forest grew wilder, the paths less visible. Finally, Soren stopped at what looked like a solid wall of thorns and ivy. He pressed his palm against a hidden stone, and the wall swung inward. Beyond it lay a ravine, and nestled inside that ravine was a structure Bryony hadn't expected. A keep, small but fortified, its walls grown over with moss and camouflage until it seemed like part of the forest itself. Welcome to Greymist Hold, Soren said. People emerged as they crossed the bridge, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and a scar across her throat, a young man barely older than Bryony with ink-stained fingers, twin girls carrying bows nearly as tall as they were. And at the entrance, arms crossed, expression unreadable, stood a man who looked enough like Soren to be his brother. You're late, the man said, and you brought company. Calum, this is Bryony Thorn. Soren's hand brushed the small of her back, a gesture so brief she might have imagined it. She's going to help us destroy our uncle. Calum's dark eyes swept over Bryony, assessing, weighing. Mira's daughter? He asked quietly. Bryony's heart clenched. You knew my mother? I knew her. Something flickered across Calum's face, gone too fast to read. You look just like her. He turned and walked inside without another word. The evidence was laid out on a table in Greymist's war room. Bryony stared at the objects, feeling their pull even from across the room. 3 letters supposedly written in Soren's hand. A vial that had contained the poison used to kill King Matthias. A dagger with the Valeric crest, allegedly used to threaten a witness into silence. Take your time. Soren stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. And if you need to stop, I won't need to stop. She said it with more confidence than she felt. The others had gathered around the edges of the room, watching her like she was either their salvation or their destruction. Calum leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. The silver-haired woman, Nyx, rested her hand on a sword hilt. The ink-stained young man, Harlan, held parchment ready to record whatever Bryony revealed. Bryony reached for the first letter. The moment her fingers touched the paper, the world dissolved. A study. Dark wood paneling. The smell of tobacco and something sour, like fear sweat. A man sits at a desk. Not Soren, older, with silver threaded through dark hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. Aldrich. He's practicing. Dipping a quill, copying strokes from a sample of Soren's handwriting, over and over until the forgery is perfect. The council will never question it, he murmurs to himself. My nephew's hand, my nephew's words, my nephew's death warrant. He laughs softly. The sound makes Bryony's skin crawl. She gasped, dropping the letter. Her knees buckled, but Soren caught her elbow, steadying her. What did you see? His voice was urgent but controlled. Aldrich. He wrote it himself. Bryony's words came out shaky. Practiced copying your handwriting until he got it right. I saw his study, the desk, everything. Harlan's quill scratched furiously across parchment. Nix exchanged a look with Calum. Can you see where the study is? Calum asked. Describe it precisely? I can try. Bryony reached for the letter again, bracing herself for the impact. This time she pushed deeper, fighting through the echo of Aldrich's presence to absorb every detail. The view from the window, a courtyard with a fountain shaped like a wolf. The books on the shelves, histories, legal texts, a collection of poetry that seemed out of place. The hidden drawer in the desk where he kept the handwriting samples. When she emerged, she was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Thornhallow Keep, she managed. The study is in Thornhallow. That's where your mother is, Soren said quietly. Bryony nodded, unable to speak. He guided her to a chair, crouching beside her with unexpected gentleness. You don't have to do the others today. We can wait. No. She squared her shoulders. We don't have time to wait. 4 days, remember? Something passed through his expression. Admiration, maybe, or concern. He didn't argue. The vial was worse. Hands. Aldrich's hands. Wearing gloves, careful not to leave traces. He's measuring powder into the vial. Precise amounts. And deadly amounts. The old fool trusts me completely, he whispers. His own brother. He'll never suspect until it's too late. And then another scene, later. Aldrich pressing the vial into the hands of a servant, whispering instructions. The servant's face is pale with fear but determined. Put it in his evening wine, you'll be rewarded beyond your dreams. The servant nods. His hands shake. Bryony came out of the vision gagging. Soren pressed a cup of water into her hands, and she drank greedily, trying to wash the taste of betrayal from her mouth. He paid a servant, she said hoarsely. I saw the face. Young, pale, a scar on his chin. Rylan, Calum said, his voice flat. One of the kitchen boys. He disappeared the day after the king's death. Disappeared or was disappeared? Nix asked. Does it matter? He's likely dead either way. Aldrich doesn't leave loose ends. Bryony set down the cup. One object remained. The dagger. You don't have to, Soren said. Yes, I do. She picked up the dagger. Night. A bedroom. A woman cowering against the headboard, tears streaming down her face. You'll tell the council what I tell you to tell them. Aldrich's voice, cold as winter stone. You'll say you saw Soren threaten you with this blade. You'll describe his rage, his threats, and his instability. Please. The woman is sobbing. Please, I don't want... What you want is irrelevant. He presses the blade to her throat. What matters is what you'll do. And you'll do exactly as I say, or I'll visit your daughter next. Bryony dropped the dagger like it was on fire. She bent double, retching, her whole body shaking. Hands caught her shoulders, held her steady. Soren's voice, low and urgent, cutting through the horror. I'm here. You're safe. I'm here. She clung to his arms, anchoring herself to the present. The bond between them flared, warm and steadying, pushing back against the darkness she'd witnessed. When she could finally speak, her voice was raw. Lady Astrid Morvain, he threatened to hurt her daughter if she didn't testify against you. A muscle feathered in Soren's cheek. Astrid was my mother's closest friend. She held me when I was an infant. His hands shook where they gripped Bryony's shoulders. He used her love for her child to destroy me. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of visions and recovery. Bryony read everything they brought her. Scraps of fabric from the night of the king's murder, a wine goblet still stained with poison residue, documents bearing Aldrich's hidden seal. Each object drained her further, left her shaking and hollow. But each one also added another piece to the puzzle. Aldrich had been planning this for over a decade. Patient, methodical. A spider spinning web so fine no one noticed until they were already trapped. Between readings, Soren stayed close. Not hovering exactly, but present, always within reach when she stumbled, always there with water or food or simply silence when she needed it. On the second night, Bryony found herself on the keep's small balcony, staring at stars she hadn't seen in years. The city's smoke had always hidden them. Here, they blazed like scattered diamonds. "Can't sleep," Soren's voice came from behind her. She didn't turn. "Too much in my head." He moved to stand beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. The bond hummed anyway, aware of him in ways that had nothing to do with physical proximity. "The visions," he said quietly. "Do they stay with you?" "Sometimes." Bryony wrapped her arms around herself. "The worst ones linger. Your uncle's cruelty. I've never felt anything so cold. He doesn't see people as people, just pieces on a game board." Soren was quiet for a long moment. "He wasn't always like this. When I was young, he used to bring me sweets from the capital, taught me to play chess." His voice roughened. "I keep trying to understand when he changed, when the man who bounced me on his knee became someone who could poison his own brother. Maybe he didn't change. Maybe he was always this, just hiding it better. That's worse somehow." They stood in silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "I'm afraid," Bryony admitted finally. "Not of the readings or even of Aldrich. I'm afraid of finding my mother and discovering she's different. That 8 years in a cell has broken something in her." Soren turned to face her. In the starlight, his eyes looked almost silver. "When I was imprisoned, waiting to die, I thought about giving up. Letting go. It would have been easier." He paused. "But I kept thinking about Tamsin, my sister. She died in the same attack that killed my mother when I was 15. I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell her I loved her." His jaw flexed. "I couldn't let Aldrich win without a fight. Not when I was the only one left to remember them." Bryony's chest ached. "I'm sorry. About your sister. Your mother. It was a long time ago." But his voice said otherwise. Grief doesn't follow timelines. His eyes met hers, and something cracked open between them. The bond, that inexplicable connection, flared warm and bright. "No," Soren said softly. "It doesn't." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Bryony." Her name on his lips sounded like a confession. "I need you to know something. The bond we share, it's not just the oath. I felt it the moment I saw you. Before you opened the door. Before you agreed to help." Her heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I didn't come to you just because of your gift. I came because—" He stopped, frustration flickering across his face. "Because I've spent 3 years alone, trusting no one, expecting nothing. And then, I found you. And suddenly I remembered what hope felt like." Bryony should have stepped back, should have reminded him they'd known each other for mere days, that this was madness, that they were running out of time. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. Soren went still for one heartbeat. Then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back, with a desperation that stole her breath. His hands trembled where they pressed against her spine, like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, both breathing hard, Bryony whispered, "This is a terrible idea." "Probably." His voice was rough. "Tell me to stop and I will." She should have told him to stop. "Don't stop," she said instead. "Not yet." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise wrapped in warmth. And somewhere in the darkness, the bond between them settled deeper, weaving itself into something neither of them could undo. Everything shattered on the third morning. Bryony was reading the last piece of evidence, a signet ring that had belonged to one of Aldrich's co-conspirators, when the vision veered somewhere unexpected. Aldrich's study again. But this time, he's not alone. A messenger kneels before him, travel-stained and exhausted. The Threadseer's daughter, the messenger says. She's with the escaped king. Our informants confirmed it. Aldrich's expression doesn't change, but something cold settles behind his eyes. Where? Grey Mist Hold. The old wolf sanctuary. Of course. Aldrich stands, moving to the window. My nephew always did have a weakness for lost causes. He pauses. Send word to Captain Vaughn. I want 50 men surrounding that hold by nightfall. No one leaves alive. The messenger hesitates. And the king? Bring me his head. I'll display it at his father's tomb. Aldrich's voice is ice. As for the Threadseer's daughter, she might still be useful. Take her alive if possible. Dead if necessary. Bryony tore herself out of the vision so violently she knocked over her chair. They know, she gasped. Aldrich knows we're here. He's sending soldiers. 50 of them. They'll be here by nightfall. The room erupted into chaos. Soren was at her side instantly, steadying her with hands that shook slightly. Are you certain? Nightfall tonight? I saw it. The messenger, the orders, everything. Bryony gripped his arms. Soren, he wants you dead. But me, he wants me alive. He knows what I can do. Then we leave now. Calum was already moving, grabbing weapons from the wall. We can't defend against 50 with so few. Leave for where? Nyx demanded. Everywhere we go, he'll follow. He has the entire kingdom's resources. Not everywhere. Soren's voice cut through the panic. Thornhallow Keep. Everyone went silent. You want to walk into his stronghold? Calum stared at his brother like he'd lost his mind. That's suicide. It's the last place he'll expect us to go. His soldiers are coming here. That means Thornhallow's defenses will be reduced. Soren's teeth clenched. And Bryony's mother is there, along with evidence he hasn't had time to destroy. We don't even know the layout. I do. Bryony's voice was hoarse but steady. I've seen it. Through the visions. I know where Aldrich's study is. I know where he keeps prisoners. She met Soren's eyes. I know where my mother is. Calum opened his mouth to argue, but Soren cut him off. This isn't a debate. We move in 1 hour. He looked around the room. Anyone who wants to stay behind has that right. I won't order anyone to die for me. No one moved. Well, Nyx said dryly, drawing her sword to check the blade. I've always wanted to see Thornhallow. Heard the gardens are lovely. Despite everything, Bryony almost laughed. Soren pulled her aside while the others prepared, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. If something goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he pressed, I need you to run. Find somewhere safe. Don't try to save me. That's not how this works. Bryony covered his hands with hers. We made an oath, remember? Blood and bond. We do this together or not at all. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You should see me when I'm actually trying. He kissed her hard, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. Together then, he said. Together. They reached Thornhallow as the sun began to set. The keep rose from the mountainside like a black tooth, all sharp angles and narrow windows. Torches flickered along the walls, but Bryony counted fewer guards than she'd expected. Soren had been right. Aldrich had sent his forces to Grey Mist. There. Bryony pointed to a section of wall obscured by overgrown ivy. Service entrance. It leads to the kitchens. You're certain? Calum asked. I've walked through it a dozen times in visions. Trust me. They left the horses in a ravine and approached on foot, moving in pairs through the gathering darkness. Nyx took point, her movements silent as shadow. The twins, Kira and Isla, covered their rear with arrows nocked and ready. The service door was unlocked, a mistake born of complacency. Inside, the keep smelled of smoke and stone and something else, something sour that made Bryony's stomach turn. The corridors were narrow, designed for servants to move unseen. Perfect for their purposes. Prisoners are held 3 levels down, Bryony whispered. Aldrich's study is in the east wing. 2nd floor. Soren nodded. We split up. Calum, take Nix and the twins. Get to the study. Find every document you can. Ledgers, letters, anything that proves the conspiracy. Harlan, you're with them. Copy what can't be carried. And you? Calum asked. Bryony and I free her mother. You should take more people. No. Soren's voice was final. If something goes wrong, I need you to get the evidence out. Expose Aldrich even if I don't survive. That's what matters. Calum looked like he wanted to argue, but he swallowed it down. Don't die, little brother. Wasn't planning on it. They split at the next junction. Bryony led Soren deeper into the keep, following paths she'd memorized from other people's memories. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was navigating a place she'd never physically been, guided by ghosts of moments she'd stolen from objects. The prison level was colder, damper. Torches burned at longer intervals here, leaving pools of shadow between. Third cell on the left, Bryony breathed. Soren moved ahead, checking corners, clearing the path. They encountered only one guard, who Soren dispatched with brutal efficiency before the man could raise an alarm. The cell door was iron, old and rusted but solid. Soren examined the lock. I can break it, but it'll be loud. Do it. He braced himself and kicked. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the lock shattered. The door swung open. And there, huddled in the corner of a cell that smelled of despair and neglect, was a woman with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that Bryony saw every time she looked in a mirror. Mama, Bryony whispered. Mira Thorne lifted her head. For one endless moment she stared at her daughter like she was seeing a ghost. Then her face crumpled, and she began to weep. Bryony ran to her mother, dropping to her knees on the filthy stone floor. Mama, it's me. It's Bryony. I'm here. Mira's hands, thin and trembling, reached out to cup her daughter's face. My girl. My brave, beautiful girl. Her voice was a rasp, ruined by years of disuse. You shouldn't have come. He'll kill you. He'll have to go through me first, Soren said quietly. He crouched beside them, his expression gentle despite the urgency. Lady Mira, can you walk? Mira's eyes found him, and recognition flickered. The prince. No, the king now. Matthias is dead. Yes. Soren's teeth clenched. My uncle killed him. You know this. I know many things. Mira struggled to rise, and Bryony helped her, alarmed at how light her mother had become. He made me read objects, for years, ferreting out enemies, exposing secrets. I refused at first. Then he threatened you. Her eyes met Bryony's. He said he'd find you if I didn't cooperate. I believed him. It doesn't matter now. Bryony's voice cracked. We're getting you out. They moved quickly, Bryony supporting her mother's weight, Soren clearing the path ahead. They made it up 2 levels before the alarm bells started ringing. Faster, Soren urged. But Mira was already flagging, her legs barely able to carry her. 8 years of captivity had stolen her strength. Go, Mira gasped. Leave me. Get the evidence. I'm not leaving you again. Bryony's grip tightened. I spent 8 years thinking you abandoned me. I won't lose you now that I know the truth. They rounded a corner and found their path blocked. Aldrich Valeric stood at the end of the corridor, flanked by a dozen armed guards. He looked nothing like the grieving uncle who'd wept at Soren's trial. His face was carved from ice, his dark eyes calculating. Nephew! His voice echoed off stone walls. I should have known you'd come here. Sentimental to the last. Soren pushed Bryony and Mira behind him. It's over, Aldrich. We have your documents, your letters, every shred of evidence you thought was hidden. Do you? Aldrich seemed almost amused. And what will you do with them? Present them to a council that already believes you're a murderer? Wave papers and expect justice? He shook his head slowly. The game is already won, boy. It was won the moment I put poison in your father's wine. You'll hang for what you've done. I think not. Aldrich drew his sword and his guards advanced. Kill the king. Take the women alive. For now. The corridor exploded into violence. Soren fought like a man possessed, his blade singing through the air, taking down 3 guards before the others could react. But there were too many. For every one he cut down, 2 more pressed forward. Bryony pulled her mother into an alcove, searching desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around a fallen torch. When a guard lunged for them, she swung it hard, catching him across the face. He screamed and staggered back, and she hit him again and again until he stopped moving. Bryony. Soren's voice, strained. She looked up to see him surrounded, bleeding from a cut on his arm, still fighting but overwhelmed. Aldrich watched from a safe distance, a thin smile on his lips. And suddenly Bryony understood. Aldrich didn't intend to fight. He was going to let his guards tire Soren out, then execute him like a trophy. No, she breathed. She grabbed her mother's hand and felt the bond flare. Show them. Mira's voice whispered in her mind, sudden and clear. I never taught you, but you have the gift. Project what you've seen. Make them witness the truth. I don't know how. Yes, you do. The bond opened it. Trust yourself, my love. Bryony closed her eyes. She thought about every vision she'd absorbed. Aldrich forging letters. Aldrich poisoning wine. Aldrich threatening a mother with her daughter's life. She gathered them like threads, wove them together, and pushed. Light exploded outward. Every person in that corridor, guards, Aldrich, Soren, saw her visions projected across the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. They witnessed Aldrich's crimes in vivid, undeniable detail. His hands mixing poison, his voice ordering murder, his smile as he plotted the destruction of his own family. The guards froze. Lies! Aldrich screamed. Illusions! Don't believe! I recognize that study, one of the guards said slowly, horror dawning on his face. That's your study, my lord. I've stood in that room. The poison, another whispered. I carried that vial. You told me it was medicine for the king. The guards turned on Aldrich. He tried to run, but Soren was faster. He tackled his uncle to the ground, pinning him with a knee to the spine. It's over, Soren said, breathing hard. By the authority of the throne you tried to steal, I'm placing you under arrest for treason, murder, and conspiracy. Aldrich's face twisted with rage. You can't. The council will see every vision she just showed, every crime, every lie. Soren's voice was ice. And then they'll watch you hang. The trial lasted 3 days. Bryony projected her visions for the council, one by one, each piece of evidence accompanied by testimony from guards who'd witnessed Aldrich's orders, servants who'd been threatened into silence, nobles who'd suspected but feared to speak. When it ended, the verdict was unanimous. Aldrich Valeric was sentenced to death for the murder of King Matthias and the attempted murder of King Soren. He would hang at dawn. Bryony didn't attend the execution. Neither did her mother. They spent that morning in the castle gardens, walking among flowers Mira had only dreamed about during her captivity. The early light turned everything gold, and for the first time in 8 years, Mira's face held something like peace. They paused beside a fountain, water cascading over stones worn smooth by time. Mira sat on the edge, trailing her fingers through the water like she was relearning what freedom felt like. I used to dream about this, she said softly. Simple things. Sunlight. Fresh air. Your face. Her voice cracked. I held on to those dreams so tightly, Bryony. They were the only things that kept me sane. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. No. Mira shook her head. I'm just stubborn. Your father used to say it was my worst quality. A sad smile crossed her face. He was probably right. You've grown so much, Mira continued, her hand clasped in Bryony's. The last time I saw you, you barely reached my shoulder. The last time you saw me, I didn't know who I was. You knew. Mira stopped walking. turning to face her daughter. You've always known, deep down. You were just afraid to embrace it. She touched Bryony's cheek. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to guide you, to help you understand your gift. You're here now. Mira's eyes glistened. Yes, thanks to you. They held each other for a long moment, letting years of grief and separation slowly unknot. Later, Soren found Bryony on the balcony where they'd shared their first kiss. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. It's done, he said quietly. Aldrich is dead. The council has confirmed my reinstatement as king. How does it feel? Hollow. He stared out at the mountains. I thought I'd feel satisfied, but all I feel is tired. Bryony took his hand. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady. What happens now? She asked. Now I rebuild what he destroyed, repair the alliances he damaged, earn back the trust of people who believed I was a murderer. Soren turned to face her. And I ask you to stay. Her heart lurched. Soren. The oath is fulfilled. Your mother is free. You have every right to walk away, start a new life somewhere Aldrich's shadow never touched. His voice dropped. But I'm asking you not to. Why? Because I love you. The words came out raw, unpolished. Because you make me believe I can be more than just a king. Because the thought of watching you leave feels worse than anything Aldrich could have done to me. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Stay. Not because of duty or obligation. Stay because you want to. Bryony looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes, the hope he couldn't quite hide, the way his hand trembled slightly in hers. She thought about the life she'd imagined. Small, safe, invisible. Then she thought about this. A man who saw her clearly, a mother restored, a kingdom that needed healing. I'll stay, she said. Soren's breath rushed out. You're sure? Ask me again tomorrow. She smiled. I'll give you the same answer. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and the bond between them blazed like sunrise. 3 months later, the bonding ceremony was held at twilight, when the sky turned from gold to violet, and the first stars began to emerge. Bryony wore deep green silk, a color that reminded her of forest light, of hope growing in unexpected places. Mira stood beside her, eyes bright with tears, hands steady as she arranged her daughter's hair. Your father would have loved this, Mira whispered. He always said you'd find your way to something extraordinary. He was talking about my gift. He was talking about you. The ceremony was simple. No grand cathedral, no thousands of witnesses, just the inner courtyard of Greymist Hold, the same place where Bryony had first arrived as a stranger. Calum stood as Soren's witness. Nyx and the twins watched from the edges, pretending their eyes weren't wet. Soren met Bryony at the altar, his eyes glowing in the fading light. When he took her hands, the bond between them sang. I choose you, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Not for duty, not for alliance. I choose you because you're the bravest person I've ever known. Because you looked at a condemned man bleeding on your doorstep and decided he was worth saving. Bryony's throat tightened. I choose you because you saw who I was when I'd forgotten. Because you gave me a choice when you could have demanded obedience. She squeezed his hands. Because you feel like home. The Oathkeeper bound their wrists with silk the color of midnight. Blood of my blood, Soren said. Bond of my bond, Bryony answered. When they kissed, the bond flared bright enough to see, a ribbon of light wrapping around them both. The celebration lasted until dawn. Bryony danced with her mother, with Kylum, with Nyx, with anyone who asked. But her eyes kept finding Soren across the crowded courtyard, and his kept finding hers. Later, much later, they stood on the balcony together, watching the stars wheel overhead. No regrets? Soren asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. Ask me in 50 years. He laughed softly, the sound rumbling through her. I'm holding you to that. Bryony closed her eyes, leaning into his warmth. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago, hunched over silk in a cramped room, counting down days to a freedom that would have been empty. She hadn't known, that night, that everything was about to change. Hadn't known that letting a stranger bleed on her floor would lead her here. Loved, chosen, finally home. He'd asked for sanctuary. She'd given him everything. And he'd given her back the world. Fair bargain, she thought as sleep claimed her. Fair trade indeed.